Are you a parent navigating the challenges of your child's learning journey? Are you wondering how to make education more accessible and engaging? If so, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Learning Disability Experts podcast, where we delve into valuable insights and strategies to support your child's different learning needs. I'm Jess, your guide on this journey.
Hello, everybody. Today we have a special guest, John Munro, who is the head of the Gow School, and we are going to learn a bit about the school and then talk about education policies for people with learning challenges in America. So welcome, John.
Hey, thank you so much, Jess. I appreciate you taking the time out and look forward to our conversation.
Absolutely, as do I. So can you tell us a bit about the Gow School's history and mission?
Sure, I would be happy to. So we are celebrating our 99th year as a school. The school was originally founded in 1926 by a gentleman named Peter Gow. Our school, by the way, is about 20 miles southeast of Buffalo, New York. And in 1926, Peter Gow was a experienced, seasoned English teacher at a all-boys private high school in Buffalo called the Nichols School. And he was growing more and more frustrated and perplexed by how often he would come across very bright, high character, highly intelligent young men who struggled mightily with reading, writing, especially foreign language. And he was determined to get to the bottom of this. At the time, I think the methodology of teaching reading was very much using and memorizing sight words. And he knew that was a real challenge for these boys. So ultimately, he decided he was going to do something about it. And he bought a small piece of land outside of Buffalo. And it had a home and a barn. And he decided he was going to convert the barn into an academic classroom, also providing dormitory rooms for boarding students to, again, get to the bottom of this frustration he had. And so concurrently, as he was putting together a pedagogy, if you will, that was going to be based on drill and kill in very small classes, he sensed there was more to the, I guess, disability that these young men were presenting in his classes. So he ended up partnering with Dr. Samuel Orton. Dr. Orton at the time was, I believe, moving from Iowa to New York City. He was working on what he called a kind of a language disability that he was seeing appear in mostly boys in his practice. And obviously he brought an expertise in neuroscience. And Samuel Orton and Peter Gow formed a relationship, a partnership. Peter Gow was traveling by train to New York to meet with Dr. Orton. And really together, the two of them created and hatched a curricula known as reconstructive language. And reconstructive language is the foundation of our school's academic program. Reconstructive language is a phonics-based curricula, and I can go into that in a little more detail. But ultimately, as the school was in its infancy, Peter Gow was providing Dr. Orton with, if you will, kind of a lab to work on figuring out the neurowiring of the students and how it impacted their reading and their learning. And in the meantime, Dr. Orton was referring students that he had been seeing that were experiencing these struggles to come to Gow. So that was the origins of the school. And over the last 99 years, we've evolved from a very small school of just high school boys. In 2012, we first admitted girls to the school. We expanded to be a school from grades 6 through 12. We just added a 5th grade program to kind of move into the upper elementary years, and also just developed a brand new postgraduate program that we're launching. So right now we serve approximately 100 students, 5th grade through pre-kindergarten. 90%, roughly, maybe a little under 90% are boarding students that come from across the country and across the globe, and a little more than 10% are local day students here in the Western New York area. So that's a quick snapshot, a quick overview. I'm happy to dig a little deeper into our curriculum, if you will, but I thought that would be a helpful start.
Yes. So that led to lots of questions that I don't have written down, kind of took me on a different path.
Sure.
So that is, wow, that's just amazing that Mr. Gow and Dr. Orton started working together before Orton and Miss Gillingham started
Right.
to work together. And
Right.
so how similar is the program that you use to the Orton Gillingham program that most of us dyslexia educators use?
Yeah, they're very similar. To be honest, Jess, I'm not that familiar with the specific nuances between the two. In my career as an educational leader, this is my first foray into leading a school with a narrow mission of serving students with dyslexia and learning differences. So it's a learning curve for me. But the RL program, perhaps unlike other Orton Gillingham programs, at least from a school perspective, is that the reconstructive language, which is proprietary to Gow, is infused into every course that our students take. So it's not a separate reading and phonics course. The RL program and the RL philosophy is also wired into our teaching of math and science and history, robotics, foreign language, etc. So it is again, it is very much a phonics-based program. It's multisensory, it's direct. Students create about 115 to 120 card deck, which include phonograms that serve as guide words, as well as those support words that are associated with that guide word. This is a very personal, kinesthetic, if you will, operation of the program for our students. They take great ownership of their particular card deck. They spend a great deal of time memorizing those guide words. It helps in their retrieval of those words. It helps in their memorization of those words. It helps them make those connections between the sounds that letter combinations make to how those sounds are converted into words and ultimately into the comprehension of those words. But it's intensive. Our students have RL class 6 days a week. We are a school that goes through Saturdays, so it's a pretty intensive academic program. But perhaps unlike a lot of schools that adopt the Orton Gillingham program, many of those schools tend to use it as a pull-out program, as scaffolding and support. And I'm sure there's overlap into the work that those schools and students do in their other courses, but it's really fully baked into, really every particular area of our curriculum. So, again, those phonograms, let's say like ASTE, ASTE, is connected to guide words like waste and paste and taste. And literally our students are drilling and memorizing and reciting. They're hearing their classmates. Our classes are very small, 3 to 5 students per class with a teacher that's been trained. All of our teachers have been trained in the reconstructive language approach. But it's interesting as I'm learning in the world of LD education and serving dyslexic students, very few people have heard of reconstructive language. They've heard of Samuel Orton, and maybe we should have called it Gow Orton back in the day. But certainly programs, excellent programs like Orton Gillingham and Wilson Reading and Lindamood Bell and others tend to be more, I guess, recognizable in the community of families that have been diagnosed dyslexia or parents who have children who are dyslexic.
Well, when I started in the world of dyslexia in 2012, most people didn't even know what Orton Gillingham was. So, over the last 12 years, it has become a common name to people with children with dyslexia. But let's face it, most people didn't know their kids were dyslexic before social media, really. I think that has really made the huge awareness for most people.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. And it's wonderful to see how many initiatives are taking place, especially in our country's public schools, to train teachers to identify signs of dyslexia earlier and earlier in the elementary years, and then correspondingly create the evaluations and testing earlier so that the remediation process can begin sooner. Especially with girls. That seems to have been a lag for a while because the father of three daughters, I can say this, girls tended to be able to compensate more easily, if you will, in their early education years, where boys tended to demonstrate typically more frustration and behaviors that triggered a reason to be tested. But I think the latest numbers are that, approximately 20% of our society have a degree of dyslexia, and it's about 50 girls. And that was a lot different even 10 years ago.
Well, and you're so right. Like often people will say, "Oh, well, more boys than girls have dyslexia." And that's not the case. It's just that it's more noticeable in boys than girls.
Right.
I was a child who was hyperactive in elementary school. And I mean, perhaps my poor behavior made it more noticeable that I had a learning challenge when I was young. I wasn't identified with dyslexia, although my mother was identified in the 1940s with dyslexia.
Wow.
And she actually got sent away to boarding school in Poughkeepsie. And I was going to ask my mom if she remembered the name of the school. Well, it was a day school and she lived at a boarding house nearby.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
There have been a number of schools and there still are in kind of the Hudson Valley of New York and Connecticut and Massachusetts that do have, a similar mission to ours. And I'm assuming that the school that your mom went to as well.
Yeah, I'm assuming so too. She's 86, almost 87 now. So, her memory's getting a little fuzzy with things.
Yep, I have an 87-year-old mom, so I hope you're not listening, Mom. You have great memory. But yes, I can relate to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is your child struggling with school, feeling overwhelmed? Introducing 3D Learning Experts, your child's personal tutor. Our expert educators provide personalized, one-on-one support tailored specifically to teach to your child's learning style. We specialize in helping students with dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, and similar learning challenges. Our tutors are trained to provide effective strategies for reading, spelling, writing, and math. With our innovative virtual platform, your child can learn from the comfort of their own home. No more commuting or scheduling conflicts. Give your child the boost they need to succeed. Experience the difference with 3D Learning Experts.
Well, and it's interesting that the Northeast has such a condensation of schools to help students versus other parts of the country.
Yeah, that is interesting. And I think some of that, I don't have the data to back this up, but I would say just in my experience in schools and over the last 37 years, there certainly is more of a culture, if you will, in the Northeast of students attending boarding schools. Some of those schools are, over 200 years old and are well established versus other parts of the country. And I hear this from families because, we have kids that come from Minneapolis and Portland, Oregon, and Los Angeles and Santa Fe, and you name it. They're often burdened with the feeling that, oh, well, I'm going to be viewed by other parents that I don't love my child because I'm sending them to boarding school. Where a lot of our families from the Northeast, it's just tends to be a little more of a common practice, not common practice, but just people are more familiar with it and they know the benefits of it. And I was lucky to attend a small boarding school years ago, and 2 out of my 3 daughters attended boarding school. So I'm certainly tuned into what I feel are some real measurable, advantages that kids can experience in those settings, and not just for a specialized school like Gow that serves a very narrow profile of learner, but schools that have different missions that have different priorities and focus on how they work with their students.
And that's a good point that you bring up. There was a private school where I lived in Southern California, and they couldn't get enough students who were dyslexic that they started accepting other neurodiversities, right, which then caused behavioral problems in the classroom setting. How do you find enough students to be able to strictly stay dyslexic? I mean, obviously there's plenty of dyslexic students, but I'm sure it's expensive to attend your school. And then, like you said, some people have to deal with the concerns of judgment of others and things like that.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jess. And it's a timely question because, we're in a phase right now where, and again, being in my second year as the head of school here, starting to work together with our school leadership to craft a vision for the future. And one of the areas where we've made a shift over the last couple of years is to really narrow not narrow our mission, but narrow the acceptance of our students who fit our mission. So to translate that, over the last 5 years since COVID, we were experiencing a slight decline in enrollment. We lost a segment of our international population, and at the time, the thought was, well, let's broaden our mission a bit, and maybe we can accept students who have a wider range of issues, not just academic issues, but social, emotional, behavioral issues. And unfortunately, even though it led to more students coming into the school, we weren't always, quite honestly, fully prepared to serve those students because they brought therapeutic needs to our school that's not who we are. That's not what our mission is. Our mission is as a college preparatory school, working with high character, high IQ, dyslexic thinkers and students who struggle with language-based learning differences, reading differences. So we have made a concerted effort over the last couple of years to find the right kids that are mission appropriate, that fit that narrow profile, and be more selective in our admissions process, which in the long term I think is going to be a really wise decision
Yes.
to serve the kids that we can really serve well. We might be doing a little less, but we're going to do it really well with this segment of kids that fit our profile, and then be more, I guess, thoughtful, more selective. And when we see those families that come to us that might have a specific, their child has a specific, behavioral or therapeutic need, it's just not fair for us to try to squeeze them into a school that doesn't have the expertise to serve them. So, we've made an effort to be a little smaller right now with the right students and to help those students who might need a school that focuses on those behavioral and social emotional issues that we don't, we're not trained for that. Our faculty's not trained for that.
Mhm. And can I ask what the cost of tuition is?
Yes, so the tuition for a boarding student, so that's someone obviously who is here 24/7 from late August till mid to late May, is $80,000, which is just is comparable, if not a little bit lower than our peer boarding schools. But again, when you look at our business model and the campus and facilities that we're able to provide for a relatively small number of schools, that's the tuition that we need to charge. We're very fortunate that approximately one half of our students receive and are supported by need-based financial aid awards. We don't want finances to be the reason why a qualified student can't attend Gow. Unfortunately, even though we have a terrific financial aid budget, we can't meet the needs of all of the applicants. And that's certainly part of our strategic thinking moving forward. How can we, make the Gow experience more affordable, and what levers do we need to pull, either in giving more financial aid or adjusting tuition to make that happen? And that's going to be an important part of our strategic planning process this year. Our day student tuition for students who, are here 6 days a week from 8 till 5 in the afternoon and are welcome to join us for dinner and study hall is, I believe, $58,000. So obviously very expensive and unaffordable for probably 95% of our population.
Well, and you had mentioned that your prices are comparable to your average boarding school. However, your average boarding school is typically for a wealthier family who, wants that prestige or whatever the reason that they choose to send their child to boarding school versus the dyslexic student. However, across the board, there's a tendency for lower income people to not be able to receive the services that wealthier people received. My mother was sent to boarding school in the 40s because her father was a doctor and he could afford to do that, versus someone who is just scraping by. They wouldn't have put any care towards sending their daughter away to get properly, to become well educated.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a great point, and it's frustrating. We would love to have a much broader socioeconomic diversity of our families and our students on campus, and we're certainly making efforts to do that. I think there could also be creative ways, Jess, where we might be able to explore more opportunities to push our curriculum into public schools and parochial schools. And once upon a time, we served more teachers over the summer in training them, not just the teachers at the Gow School, but opportunities for teachers outside of Gow, whether it be in a public or a private school, to attend a teachers training institute here to be trained in the reconstructive language curriculum. So I think there could be opportunities that might allow us to provide that in a public school setting and obviously make it accessible to the kids that need it. So again, part of our thinking moving forward on how we might be able to leverage what we do and support those that can't afford the tuition.
So even though your program is proprietary, you are willing to educate outside teachers to use the program. That's interesting.
I think that, yeah, I mean, I know of one school in particular that I used to work very closely with that is doing a great job of this kind of work in another part of the country, and I'm looking to maybe apply that model to the work that we do here. And it's a win-win, because I think as a school, we, for a modest fee, we might be able to generate some revenue on our end by training teachers. And in turn, it helps those teachers provide opportunities and really making a difference in the lives of these kids in a, potentially public or parochial school setting. So hold that thought. We're not there yet, but it's certainly on the top of mind.
Well, I would love to talk to you about that in the future, because one of my goals when I was in college, I did a project that was creating a boarding school in California for students with dyslexia. And I've pushed that out of my mind multiple times over the years, but it pops in back into my, thoughts from time to time. So that could be a possibility to do up in Northern California, and have a
Right.
place available. But let's get into the current US policies for kids with learning challenges. Can you talk to that at all? I don't know if you're really aware of what they are, but
I think just to a degree, you may know more, and I'd certainly love to hear your thoughts. I would say in my last year and a half in working at the Gow School, one of the frustrations I see play out, I would say almost on a daily basis here, is either a current student at Gow, and I would say approximately a third of our students, give or take, a third of our students are funded by their public school district. And that in some public school districts can be a collaborative, positive process. With other school districts, it can be contentious and divisive. Obviously, public schools don't like writing the Gow School a check for $80,000 because their public school doesn't have the tools to serve the child. And I understand that. But there are other public schools who recognize they don't have the services and the trained faculty, and they really want to support their child, and they work very closely, and some of them are proud to write that check to support our school. One of the challenges, Jess, is that, to do this, it typically requires a family to engage in a legal dispute with their public schools. And sometimes that requires a legal expense to hire a lawyer to do that work on behalf of the child. So that's frustrating sometimes to see the child and the family caught in the middle. The family wants to do what's in the best interest of the child, but doesn't have the tuition or the financial capacity to send their child to Gow. They're frustrated because they're not seeing progress made in their public schools. And this isn't a blanket statement against all public schools. Many public schools do have the resources, do have the expertise to allow a child to find success and thrive, but many don't. And that's where, and I don't know the details or why perhaps some public schools, that's probably funding, but why some public schools are better equipped at serving dyslexic thinkers and children with language-based learning differences. But it does play out on our end. Our faculty are frequently subpoenaed by public school districts to prove that we are serving the child well. And I understand it. I get it. It's a frustration because kids get put in the middle. And frankly, it stresses time that our faculty need to commit to their daily responsibilities here as teachers. We're finding the right balance now, but it's something that we're exploring more carefully to find the right balance, if you will. It's not there right now.
And do your teachers have to like fly to whatever state?
No, it's all, we know, thank God. It's all Zoom. But still it can add up to, 5 or 6 hours a week at some periods of time for some students. And that's, for a teacher, I mean, and again, we're a boarding school. So our teachers, many of them are dorm parents. So their day is, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., hoping nothing happens between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. Once in a while, something happens. Somebody might be throwing up in the hallway. Somebody might be homesick. So our teachers go above and beyond. I'm incredibly proud of them. I had the opportunity to go to a boarding school, so I really understand the power of relational learning. I see it here every day because, our student who, might be struggling in their math class, their math teacher might also be their soccer coach, or might be their table head at dinner, or might be their dorm parent. So the connections here, and with any residential school, any boarding school, not just Gow, I think that is kind of the secret sauce and the magic of the strength of community, and that we're all in this together. But it does, I mean, there aren't many, I worry about the future of finding Gow teachers, because I think this generation, and I have kids of that age, not many are signing up for, the length of days and the weeks and the commitment that our teacher, that really is required out of our teachers. So
yeah, I mean, that's so true. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
I mean, you can say more. I just don't want to say more to that.
Yeah. So anyways, I share what I think you have some concerns about the uneven playing field, if you will, in education, especially in the public schools. And that, often, unfortunately, the area code you're born into often dictates your path in life. If you're born into a area code with very low income, struggling public schools, low percentage of kids that go on to college, those are a lot of headwinds and a lot of obstacles. And it's just simply because that's where you live. And you can look in parts in Western New York, you can look in areas where I lived before here in Connecticut, where you might have a town that is, public schools are thriving, 80% of the graduates are going on to college, 75% are getting a college degree in less than 6 years, and you go 1 mile away to another town where those numbers are flip-flopped, and 30% are graduating from high school and going to college, and it's just a matter of where you live. And so it's frustrating.
Yeah, we lived in Texas when my 2 profoundly dyslexic kids were diagnosed, and they received excellent pull-out services,
right,
group setting, but it was much better than anything we had experienced prior to moving to Texas. I couldn't figure out why my daughter couldn't spell, and I had been trying to figure out since she was 3, and none of the school teachers in Las Vegas, where my kids were born, had any clue. They were just like, they would identify my daughter's ADHD and they would just ignore the dyslexia. And the minute we got to Texas, my daughter was diagnosed with dyslexia by her teacher because they were well trained there. So I thought all of Texas was like that until I moved back to California and was attending dyslexia conferences. And there were people from Texas coming to the conferences. And I'm like, why are you coming all the way out here? And they said, because we don't have anything in Texas, because they lived in lower income zip codes. So they weren't receiving the excellent education my kids had received in Texas. And I was blown away by that.
Right, right.
And this was public school.
Is your child struggling with school? Feeling overwhelmed? Introducing 3D Learning Experts, your child's personal tutor. Our expert educators provide personalized, one-on-one support tailored specifically to teach to your child's learning style. We specialize in helping students with dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, and similar learning challenges. Our tutors are trained to provide effective strategies for reading, spelling, writing, and math. With our innovative virtual platform, your child can learn from the comfort of their own home. No more commuting or scheduling conflicts. Give your child the boost they need to succeed. Experience the difference with 3D learning experts.
I mean, I'm familiar with some school districts for kind of unique reasons that are dedicating more resources to training teachers, to identify signs of dyslexia, to ramp up and put more resources behind testing. Mayor Adams in New York City having a few struggles right now. I hope that gets resolved, but that's another story. But he's dyslexic, and he has raised incredible amounts of money and directed resources in the New York City public schools, which is incredibly admirable. And I think you're going to see a real shift in the work that New York City public school teachers are doing with students who are dyslexic. State of Kentucky is doing a lot of good work. I think a lot of that, you might know more than I, but I think a lot of that funding in Kentucky has come directly out of the Muhammad Ali Foundation. Muhammad Ali was dyslexic, and that family foundation has devoted a lot of resources towards awareness of dyslexia, which is translated into really good work in the public schools there. So I've seen, bits and pieces of success in certain school districts.
Common Core, that is horrible for dyslexic students.
Right.
It really did not help them at all. It just confuses them because they're
Right,
being taught 3 or 4 different ways to do something. So, our country is definitely behind with servicing 20% of our nation, but it's definitely made progress since I joined this world 12 years ago. I mean, I've been dyslexic my whole life, but joined the world in understanding what dyslexia is and making it my profession.
Thank you for that work you're doing.
And same to you. Thank you as well. Yeah. And are there any specific policies or initiatives that you believe are particularly effective in supporting students with learning challenges?
Well, thank you for that question. I would suggest that there are programs that we have designed here and parts of our curricula that really resonate with the dyslexic mind. And I would say in particular, and it's probably one of for our kids at least, they would say it's maybe the most prestigious opportunity they have here, and that's to be part of our robotics program. It's a robotics program that competes nationally against other schools, high schools with traditional learners, and we tend to do very well. We're fortunate that a graduate of the Gow School, and I should know his name, and I'm forgetting it right now. A graduate of Gow is the founder of a program, and I still believe it gets a lot of media attention on Discovery Channel and other outlets. Is a program called BattleBots, and it's where individuals, schools, universities, adults compete in the design and engineering of these weaponized robots that they control, and they compete against other schools and other organizations that have these types of programs. And it again, our kids get a great deal of pride, especially when there's an opportunity to use hands-on learning with their engineering and science and math skills. A lot of our graduates take that on to their work in college. We do have graduates, I would say a high percentage of our graduates that migrate into the engineering space as a career after Gow. So we try to support that element of our program. And again, I think because we're blessed to have an incredible robotics facility. We're fabricating steel and designing and physically building the equipment here, and then taking it on the road and competing in various competitions. When the timing lines up, we will live stream those competitions so the rest of the kids on campus can see how we're performing. And again, I think as we try to distinguish ourselves or identify ourselves as a school different perhaps than our competitor schools, that's one area that really, I think really sets us apart. And I think that's important for our kids who have those aspirations. I see more and more of our students are also gravitating towards the arts, the visual arts, the fine arts, performing arts. And that is also translated into work that they're doing at the college level as well. So, we're creative in what we do. We have a tradition of a program that emphasizes structure and consistency and predictability and routine, which is very helpful with the learning styles and the learning profiles that our students present. And we're bound to that program, and we see the benefits of having that day-to-day structure. And it's 6 days a week, and it's a pretty strict dress code. I'm not wearing my tie today, but we do wear jacket and tie on Wednesdays. Excuse me, on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And I think that's an important characteristic and culture of the school that promotes unity, but also conformity in a positive way. But we're also stretching it a little bit to allow kids to have some individuality as well in how they represent themselves. So we moved to a dress sneaker this year, which has created a little bit of friction in terms of interpretation, but the kids enjoy it. And again, it's part of the culture of the school. So I think I strayed from your initial question there a little bit. Apologies.
That's quite all right. So before I forget, I would like to understand why you have such an intense 6-day week program.
Well, our goal, we are first and foremost, we are a college preparatory school that wants to instill academic confidence and prepare every one of our graduates to have success academically at the college level. So that is linked directly to our mission. I would say that times are shifting a little bit in the last 10 years in terms of the path that students may take following a high school graduation. I think for many of our kids, and I think for many families who choose to enroll their children at Gow, they are thinking about that next step to college. Some of them come to Gow thinking their child would never go to college, and they come here and they see a 99% conversion rate of graduates into colleges, and that's very appealing to them. That being said, I'm not convinced that college is the right path for every one of our students. I think there are opportunities outside of college. There are opportunities for some of our students to do 1 or 2 year gap programs before they go to college. I think there's some opportunities for our graduates to go into the trades and have develop a very successful career with growth early on without incurring a large college debt. So we want our kids to be successful. I think our primary focus has been around equipping them with the academic tools, but I'd like to put even more work into the skills that they need in life and to make sure they're the best citizen they can be, the best spouse they can be, the best brother they can be, the best father or mother they can be. We put a lot of emphasis at Gow in complementing our academic program with our 4 pillars that identify with character traits: kindness, respect, honesty, and hard work. And we weave that into all facets of life here at Gow, in the classroom, in the dining hall, on the stage, on the athletic fields. Again, it's about a whole child approach and preparing our kids for life after Gow.
And how long do they usually attend Gow?
Great question. So yes, we stretch. We have a pioneering group of 2 boys who are in our 5th grade. It's our first 5th grade class this year, and all the way up to 12th grade. I would say that the majority of students come to us probably between 8th and 10th grade. We occasionally will have a handful of 11th graders join us. Philosophically, based on the profile of learners that we accept, our goal is to keep them through graduation. And for many of them, that's whether they start in 6th grade or whether they start in 11th grade, that is the appropriate path that they take. That being said, occasionally we'll have a student that might outgrow us in 10th or 11th grade, might really have those skills to re-enter mainstream public school education. We've seen that work occasionally, and we also have seen it, the boomerangs that think they're ready to get back. We want to support them. We might make a counter argument that it's best to a parent that a child should stay here for another year. Some of those move on and have successful experiences after they've had Gow for 2 or 3 years. But really, our success is found in those students that remain through graduation and stay on that track that gets them on that path to college.
So potentially 6 years now, and now 7 years.
Yeah. Well, I guess 8 years: 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. Yeah. So with 5th grade now. So and we're thinking about now that there's more resources and more attention on dyslexia and identifying it earlier in the elementary grades, we're not opposed to considering having a lower school and elementary school of maybe, second to fifth grade, but we're, 1 year at a time.
Of boarding school kids?
These are, well, I don't think we would go boarding below sixth grade. Our two fifth graders are day students, but, depending on, they're in England, for example, it's not uncommon for kids to go to boarding school in third, fourth, fifth grade.
Yeah,
Not
but
not
my
part of the norm.
understanding in England, they don't have as close-knit relationships with their families as in America as
I
well.
think I think there's some truth to that.
I mean, I couldn't imagine sending my second grader off to
Right. Yeah, I think it depends. We've seen a few. I mean, we don't have. I mean, our sixth and seventh grades are typically pretty small. Maybe three, four, five kids in each of those grades. And I think probably just as you're saying, though, that those are early. That's early to send a child to boarding school, I think, in the minds of a lot of parents. But families have unique circumstances where this environment works well for them. I mean, we have an academic calendar, Jess, just as a quick aside, that our philosophy is, we as a community work really, really hard for about 6 weeks, and then we take a week off. And we start in late August. We have a break starting tomorrow. It's right at the right time. And the campus will empty, and kids will go home and they'll have a full week. Our faculty will have a full week to recharge. We'll come back a week from Monday, do a solid 4 weeks, 6 days a week, classes Saturday, take a week off for Thanksgiving, another 4 weeks, 2 weeks off for the winter holiday, another 6 weeks, early January to mid-February, a week off, about another 4 or 5 weeks, and then a 2 week spring break around April, and then we wrap up in mid to late May. So we get in our 170 days, but I think families appreciate, even though obviously there can be a cost involved, especially if you live internationally, but to have those opportunities to connect with their kids for a meaningful period of time, multiple times over the course of the year.
Yeah, there's definitely a huge investment, even if they are getting the school to their local school to pay for it. They're
Right,
talking about
right,
all those flights.
right.
Yeah. Well, people will do anything for their children, and that's important.
We think so.
Is your child struggling with school, feeling overwhelmed? Introducing 3D Learning Experts, your child's personal tutor. Our expert educators provide personalized, one-on-one support tailored specifically to teach to your child's learning style. We specialize in helping students with dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, and similar learning challenges. Our tutors are trained to provide effective strategies for reading, spelling, writing, and math. With our innovative virtual platform, your child can learn from the comfort of their own home. No more commuting or scheduling conflicts. Give your child the boost they need to succeed. Experience the difference with 3D Learning Experts.
What do you see the future of education for students with learning disabilities in a general population?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, the educational landscape is, continues to shift with different opportunities, online opportunities, storefront, if you will, opportunities with lots of flexibility and timing and classes. So it's a little daunting not to be able to look into the crystal ball. I mean, I feel schools like Gow, private schools that have a very, very specific mission, um, are are going to remain healthy and in demand. I think private schools that are kind of a one size fits all and can make a promise to um, uh, successfully work with any range of learning style. I think, I don't know. I think those schools are going to perhaps struggle a little bit more. Um, I don't know. The industry that we're under the umbrella of the National Association of Independent Schools, about 1,000, I think, or no, maybe bigger than that, maybe close to 1,300 schools throughout the country, across the globe. Most domestic, most here in the United States. But that's been an industry that has um, seen tuition increases, far exceed inflation. Birth rate numbers are down. So this, the private school and independent school space is going to need to think very creatively about how each of those schools establishes and maintains, long-term financial sustainability, because it is ultimately a business model. We have, majority of our revenue that comes in is through tuition, and the vast majority of our expenses go to faculty salary and staff salary. So, we need to look at, I think every private school needs to look at, what levers they need to move within that business model to remain healthy. We're fortunate to be a school that has a very strong endowment. We have no debt. So, we're despite our enrollment being a little lower than we wanted, we were built because of generations of really good financial stewardship from previous boards of trustees, where we can weather this storm. I worry that there are a number of schools out there that aren't able to have that financial security. But that doesn't mean we're going to rest on our laurels, because this is a unique program, and it's expensive when you have classes of 3, 4, 5 students in a class, and you have a 120 acre campus with 30 buildings that need to be heated and maintained, et cetera. So, that's part of this. I mean, for us personally, individually here at Gow, we're looking really creatively on what Gow needs to be, 10 years from now, what does Gow need to look like to be the best school to attract the best faculty and staff and mission appropriate kids? And what do we need to do over these next 10 years to be that school? And so I think there's opportunities for, at least in the private and independent school sector and public school sector. I mean, I would love to look at creative partnerships, mergers with other private, independent, or public schools, so that we can best serve the students in our community, and in our case, being a boarding school, serve students from across the globe.
Well, when you were talking about the traditional private schools struggling right now, when I was in school back in the 80s, I went to private school in New York City, and they were struggling at that point. And so many of the small private schools came together and formed one umbrella, I guess, where they were supporting each other. I don't know exactly how it, happened, but I remember the name of the schools kind of changed in the 80s.
Yeah, I think you're going to see more of that over the next 5 to 10 years. Some of that's already happening. I would say, from being in Connecticut for most of my career, there have been a lot of schools that have private schools, independent schools that have closed or merged with others or have been absorbed by others. And again, that's cyclical, I suppose, in terms of the economy and the options that are available to families as educational choices. But I think we're going to go through a period of that in the near future.
Well, and like you said, fewer children are being born at this point. So
Yeah.
there's less chairs that will need to be filled.
Right.
In the metropolitan areas anyway. I mean, I don't know that if that changes as much everywhere.
Yeah, I think, depending on what, parts of the country you're in, and then countries that cities or regions or states that might be seeing more accelerated movement in terms of population growth, or people migrating from some states to other states. So it's gonna be, I think everyone will feel it, but regionally the impact will vary.
Before we part ways, I'd love to know what advice you would give parents whose child is struggling, of how to look into your program, and what they need to do with their schools if it is something that they cannot financially afford on their own.
Yeah, I think there are really good resources out there. I'm sure you're familiar with organizations, obviously, like the IDA, International Dyslexic Association. I think there are, areas within different parts of the country where the work being done to support students with learning differences could provide additional resources. I don't want to be overly self-promotional here, but one of our former members of our board of trustees, who had a son that went here, wrote an amazing book, which really is, yes, it speaks to the impact that Gow had on her child, but more than that, it is an incredible resource guide for families who have recently learned that their child was diagnosed dyslexic. And it gives links and resources and educational consultants and social media groups, et cetera, that they can partner with to get the help they need. It's out there. It's just not always that easy to find. So start early. I think, parents really need to be advocates for their children, and they need to, they need to challenge those public school administrators if they feel that their child is not getting the services they deserve. They need to carefully, review those standardized test scores and look at their, grade level equivalencies where their children are or where they should be, and ask the tough questions, and do it sooner than later, because we see a lot of families that come to Gow in 7th or 8th grade with really good kids who have been kind of pushed along through their public school system because they're good kids, they aim to please, they're cooperative, they advance them along, and all of a sudden, the parents put it together, 5th grade, 7th grade, 10th grade. My child's reading at a 1st grade level. Why didn't I know this until now? And I hear these stories all the time. And a lot of times is that the parents, the schools weren't waving red flags. They weren't inviting them in and say, we have a concern about your daughter or your son's ability to read. We need to recommend testing. And, that's tough. I mean, again, school districts that are well-resourced and have those experts might be able to attend to that versus others that don't. And again, sometimes that draws on socioeconomic boundaries, unfortunately.
Well, in California, school policy is not to bring it up to the parents. Teachers can lose their job for suggesting that their child might have dyslexia or a learning challenge.
Right.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah. And you see that in public school districts where, they're getting tax dollars devoted to the children in their district. And sometimes that can be compromised if that child's leaving the public district to go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
For example, a private school outside of Buffalo, New York. Again, we talked about it earlier. There are wonderful administrators at school districts that put the child first, and there's others that put dollars and cents first.
Mm-hmm. Well, John, thank you so much for this amazing interview. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to talk to my listeners, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and enjoy your week off.
Yeah, well, I'll be doing a little working, be meeting with some feeder schools and some educational consultants, but it will be a different pace and be able to recharge a little bit. But thank you, Jess. I hope our paths cross or conversations continue. I really appreciate the spotlight you're putting on this very important subject.
Thanks.
You got it. All right, take care now.